This is Justice League 113 from the Arden days. This is written by Wein, and it is a story from the 70s where we retcon, or rather find out, what happened to Sandman's sidekick, Sandy Hawkins, who later goes on to adopt the Sandman mantle himself and become the second Sandman in the current comics. He's not appeared in a while, actually. I half expect an incompetent writer and editor to just have the original Sandman back alive again. This is 100 pages, and what is good about that is it means it has better binding than most books from this age, so the pages didn't fall out easily for us. But all the extra pages are just reprints, which is fine, but I won't gan out with them. I'm only interested in the first story, which is all new. Nice contents page with some original art for it. And our story is one of the classic Justice League and Justice Society team-ups. And this one is maybe the most inventive they got. Instead of telling a big eye-concept story that unites the two teams, here we have a rather somber story about one character letting down his loyal friend. With that said, and with all the positivity in the world, this is still a Silver Age DC story, by which I mean it is a DC story from 1975, which still hadn't bothered to move forward since the Silver Age. It has all the hallmarks of these stories, and it includes the abrupt ending that I always point out. Honestly, it's not until the 80s that DC really upped their game and finally step out from this dated Silver Age model. Sandman, his secret sand cave, has been torn apart and something has broken loose from an olden cell. And now we find out that it was Sandman's kid sidekick, Sandy Hawkins. We get some backstory, and this is something that is rich with potential. Actually reopening and expanding on Sandy's history as Sandman's sidekick. Like, there should be a Sandman Year One type of story from Sandy's perspective. I definitely think we have not really had Sandy Hawkins's past shown that well. And part of that is because of the decision in Magical Mystery Sandman to retcon Sandy Hawkins out of existence, which thankfully didn't stick, but yeah, here we get some quick stuff on how Sandy became Sandman's sidekick. And then Sandman, he tried to invent a new sleeping gas gun, but it went wrong and it did an explosion, and Sandy was caught in the blast. And all the chemicals, they caused him to mutate into a maddened sand monster thing. And Sandman caught him and kept him sedated in a cell while searching for a cure. But now the mutated Sandy has escaped. Also, I do appreciate that they have presented this story and used it as a valid excuse for why Sandman suddenly ditched his dumb purple and yellow superhero costume and went back to his hard, much better look. So our heroes, they set out in search of Sandy. We have got Superman, Mr. Fantasticals, Minuteman, Batman, Wonder Woman, the Flask with the funny art, Green Lanterns, the Jordan Albert one, and then Sandman, of course. Not a bad assemblage of heroes, not perfect, but sufficient enough for the story. Monster Sandy, he attacks a wedding and he is met by three of the heroes because it is an DC story, so naturally they split up into smaller groups. And now we are going to see the same basic scene repeated over, just with different sets of characters. I'm not down on Silver Age or ad stories. I think Marvel have some great stories from the 60s and the 70s. They have some really inventive or outright fun stuff. And then DC just have the same template over and over again with little to no lasting impact beyond that the stories might be fondly remembered and referred to 20 years later by stupid people who romanticise these pretty crappy DC comics from back then. By itself, this story is fine. Most of that stuff is fine in a vacuum, but the minute you read more than one of them, you notice how insanely unimaginative and repetitive all the plotting is. The couple, they start throwing pies at Monster Sandy, and that is easily the highlight of the issue. But then Sandy, he escapes to go and be met by another trio. And I've obviously started being negative about this, but if you are into Sandman and Sandy and stuff like that, that'll keep you going through this tired, formulaic comic. That is the only real recommendation I can give it. It is significant for two characters that I really like. I've been thinking, actually, Sandman, I think he might be my favourite DC character now. I'm probably wrong about that, but he's definitely in the top 5. He's in the top 5 with Spectre and Superman and Captain Atomant and whoever the other one is. So now it is the Flask, Batman and Wonder Woman who face Sandy, and unsurprisingly, Sandy, he escapes. And now we cut over to our final team, which is just Green Lanterns and Sandman. And Sandy, he is on a beach, and Green Lanterns is useless. He gets defeated straight away. No wonder he went evil. He is a massive failure with a borderline personality disorder. But what we are really here for is Sandman and him confronting the sins of his past or whatever. There's a nice little moment where Sandman is able to connect with Sandy, but then the superheroes, they show up and ruin it all by attacking him again. And then Sandy, he ends up causing an earthquake, which is a very last minute terror that didn't really need for the plot. And Superman, he saves the day by stitching the fissure shut with Wonder Woman's magic lasso, which would be this issue's crowning moment if we didn't already have people throwing pies at a sand monster a few pages earlier. And the ending, it isn't too abrupt by DC standards, but it doesn't really resolve anything beyond saying that Sandman is ashamed of himself for causing Sandy's transformation. Sandy, he isn't cured of it either. That is apparently in a DC Comics Presents issue, but this here, it's a bit of more emotional ending than you were expecting. I didn't mind the story much. I think it is frustrating seeing the same things hour and hour again in these DC comics, but this one manages to raise its head a bit higher than some of the others by its use of intriguing characters and it feeling like an important part of the history of Sandman and Sandy Hawkins. They really should do like Sandman Year 1 or something like that and retell stories like this that have some good ideas behind them or needed more depth added to them. Stuff that maybe wasn't executed too well the first time. I do think Lenny Wein, he did everything he could to make this a bit better than the standard DC book of this time period. So I'm going to give it 7 thumbs up. And remember, don't mention the Scandinavian barcodes.